Eu fui lá na tarde e disse, está bom.
So we're going to begin asking Fabio to kindly read it for us, please, Fabio.
This is a message from the book The Way, the Truth, and the Life from Francisco Xavier by the Spirit Emmanuel. Chapter 47, The Big Question. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, but do not do as I say? Jesus, Luke 6:46. In lamentable indifference, many people wait for the death of the physical body in order to hear the sublime words of Christ. However, the reason for this is inexplicable. After all, the Master is alive in his gospel of love and light. We do not have to wait for solemn occasions to hear his sublime and clear teachings. Many disciples come to the holy endeavor wanting direct revelations. They would have more faith, they state wrongly, if they could just hear the Lord personally in his divine manifestations. They think they deserve the gifts of heaven, and they went up believing that serving the gospel is too much for human effort. Consequently, they begin hoping for unexpected miracles without realizing that idleness has subtly become mixed in with their vanity, thereby annulling their efforts. Such folks do not know how to hear the Divine Master's immortal words. They do not know that their work is that to which they have been called, no matter how humble it may seem. Whether as politicians or street sweepers, whether living in a palace or in a hut, people can do what Jesus has taught them. That is why the Lord's opportune question should be indelibly engraved in all places of worship, so that when pronouncing his name, disciples may never forget to sincerely abide by the recommendations of his sublime word.
Thank you, Father. Thank you very much. So now, friends, we're going to do our prayer. For those who are here first time, we do our prayer. It's not a ritual. It's an action of the mind over matter. It's communication with God, and we do it in a collective fashion. So it's very different because it's not like individual petitions. We join one same mind to mind. This togetherness, energetically, vibratorily, makes a whole lot of difference, all right? So those who are here with us over the internet, we're fixing the camera. Carlos is warning us to make sure the friends over the internet also can participate. So, since we're gonna say a prayer, the very question, the big question, why do we evoke the help of on high? Do we really need it? And what for? So let us meditate on it. Right? Let us feel our connection with God, the Father, Mother of all of us, irrespective of our consciousness, of our personal choices. Dear Father, Mother God, you have always loved us, and we are discovering our love for you. As we admire nature, we see your creation. And we are mesmerized by your intelligence. By your capacity to make everything so harmonious. But the most special realization is when we see that we are your co-creators, that you count on us to co-create life, not only the flesh, but with our thoughts and feelings, and words as well. May this therapeutic moment be helpful to everyone who is with us in both realms of life, spiritual and material. We rejoice in your presence always. May everyone who has their name in the book of prayer feel your presence and the healing that comes with it. We certainly ask for your guidance and for your permission as you grant us the protection to be here. With gratitude, we begin our session tonight, and so be it. Okay, so let's find, because the camera is here, but we're looking here, so we have to sit a little bit here. So what's going to happen today? This book has 26 chapters, and we have seen this far the preface in 2 chapters. But because this book is so important, we're going to recapitulate what we've seen this far to make sure that we are on the same page as we keep evolving to the next chapters. Because chapter 3 is about dating, which is so interesting. But to understand it, we need to go back and recapitulate before we add more information, okay? This book is not yet published in English, though fully translated by our team here at the Spiritus Sara Virginia. Our dear Daisy is going to help us recapitulating these chapters. As she wraps up the recapitulation, we will open for comments and questions, okay? Let's just see what is on there.
So hello friends, what a beautiful day for us to be here studying this book that if you read the title, Life and Sex, you might be thinking about what is the content of this book. Very interesting. This book was psychographed, as we will see, in 1970 by Chico Xavier, by Emmanuel through Chico Xavier. So if we go to this book, it has a preface and 26 chapters. It covers anything. It starts by defining what is sex. It talks about family, about dating. It talks about divorce, about happy unions and happy unions. It covers homosexuality, abortion. So just going through that list, we see that it encompasses what is the core in our lives, right? Because we go to school, we learn so much, but These topics are not taught by us at any school. We don't talk about it. Even sometimes parents have a hard time discussing the subjects with their children. So in a very didactic way, very short chapters, Emmanuel brings a lot for our reflection. So in the preface, it starts by talking about sexual education. If we read sexual education, we think about schools. Oh yeah, we learn about sexual education in school. How we can be protected, how does it happen? But Emmanuel starts very interesting by saying, we're not here to prohibit anything, but we are here to educate. Great. That's what we learn in Spiritism, that we have our free will, we have the choice to choose. We go back in our history, we see that prohibition hasn't worked in the past. No, because you prohibit and then people go out and then they actually do it. So Emmanuel comes and says, okay, let us educate it. But to educate ourselves, we need to understand. And that's why he, in the preface, says, let us study, let us educate. Okay. He continues and say, let us not impose abstinence, but dignifying use with due respect to others and to oneself. Dignified use. So first and foremost, who invented sex?
Everyone created us.
God, right? And it's so interesting because nowadays we can say bad words in public. We can talk openly about so many things, but do people talk about sex? Besides the minimum, what we call sexual education, children get in schools? No, but we turn on the TV. Okay, we go to Netflix, right? Go to the top rated series nowadays. If we look at them, for certain, they will have some type of sexual content and violence, if not both combined. Because that's nowadays, it's what sells or what is on top of everyone's mind. So it is openly on TV. Those of us who are from Brazil, there's the so famous soap opera. A few years ago, I went to visit my parents and I was shocked because it was prime time, it was like 8 p.m., the top rated, thank you, John. And wow, it's pretty explicit and it's an open TV channel. So we have it on TV. It's so open, but then do people actually educate themselves? We know, we talked, God created sex. So why is there a taboo in discussing it? He says, we're not imposed that people don't have sex because sex comes from God. It's imbued in us, but he says, let us dignify. But then you might be asking, okay, how do we do it? Tell us, Emmanuel. And we're here to learn with Emmanuel, right? We're all learning with him. So he says, let us dignify it. So first and foremost, he says, with due respect to others and to ourselves. So not only for our satisfaction, our pleasure to fulfill our needs, but do we think about those who we are also engaging with? He will tell us more. He says, not in discipline, but control, not free impulse and responsibility. These two words, he will come back to it later on, talking about control and responsibility. Why is control important? Are we gonna go out and have sex with whoever we want at whatever time we want? We have free will, but he will say later on, there's law of action and reaction. So he's saying learn to sublimate it, control it, and also have responsibility. So that is the preface. And he ends the preface by saying there's one particular goal as we talk about dignifying, is personal sublimation. So if we look at the definition of the word sublimation, it says to sublimate is to change the form, but not the essence. Psychologically means changing the means of expression from something based and inappropriate to something more positive and acceptable. So to sublimate it, we're saying we're not going to change the essence. It's still going to be there, but we will change the form. We will sublimate this creative force. In Spiritism, we learned that sex is a creative force. It's creativity. We're co-creating with God. But if we learn to sublimate it, the essence will be there, but what will be the form? We will be sublimate something that is divine. It's important to notice that the title of the book is Life and Sex, and there's a very particular order. Why didn't Emmanuel say sex and life? Well, because we learn in this book with Emmanuel that sex is not bigger than life. Sex is part of life. But if it becomes bigger than life, then are we really sublimating it? So it is part of our lives, but our lives come first. So we're recapping today. So that's why we're going to go a little bit faster, but we'll open for questions at the end. So in the first chapter, Emmanuel goes first to talking about regarding sex, talking about the definition of sex. And he starts with a very important question that it is in the Spirit's book by Kardec. So remember, the Spirit's book, Kardec asked the higher spirits, and the higher spirits answered. Can a spirit who has animated the body of a man animated the body of a woman in a new existence and vice versa? So why do we start with this question? We might be asking. It's the very first chapter. He goes back to another book. Why are we starting with this question? Well, first is for us to know that we as a spirit, there's no sex. There's no man or woman. But as we go through these interships, as we reincarnate and we require a physical body, and we discarnate and we come back, well, the first thing for us to know is that it's not because I'm a woman in this life, I'm necessarily going to continue to be a woman in future lives. We have interships because we need to acquire the masculine, the feminine, until we get to a state like a perfect spirit who will be able to balance both. But we need those interships in the body of a man or in the body of a woman. And that's exactly what the spirits explain to us, that yes, the same spirits can animate men and women. So the very first question for us, as we study this book in this first chapter, at a time in our society that gender identity is so talked about, right? Now there is transgender, there's binary, there's so many different references, and we're not talking about here about sexual orientation because we know in Spiritism we have the right to choose. But the main question for us is, what is our role in that particular body that we were given? No one really taught us that before, right? Have we stopped to think, if I am in the body of a man or a woman, what are the things that I came to learn in this reincarnation? I have two friends of mine, a couple, and they were expecting, and they said, oh, we want to choose a neutral name because they would choose later on how they want to identify themselves. Okay, we respect, right? But valid. But what are we teaching our children from the moment they're born? Yes, they will grow up, they have the right to choose. But do we teach them why you are in the body of a boy or a girl? What are the things that you have to learn? You have specific functions in your body that are different. So let us reflect on this and let us teach our children. We will later on in this book, it talks about homosexuality and, it will go into more details about it. But the question here is about sex, men or women. What do we have to learn? Physically, emotionally, spiritually. That is the first question for us in the chapter. And then he goes to the definition. So what is the definition? It is just the physical act that we know of sex. He says sex is a respectable but a profoundly holy attribute of nature, demanding education and control. So he goes back to education and control, as we talked about. But before he says it's a holy attribute of nature. It is holy, it is divine. It is only the physical act. No, we know in Spiritism that if we think, we create, we connect. So that's why it is in the gospel according to Spiritism. There is what they say, when we think, we are connecting. We are creating. So we might be in a relationship with someone and we might say, oh, but I don't do anything. But I have fantasies with other people. I watch things with other people. And then people don't understand why there are so many problems within the relationship in the couple. It is because there are not only the two, but there are so many other people involved, because as we think, we connect. We make a connection. So they say, I cannot fix my marriage or this relationship. But it's because they're not alone. There's a whole lot of spiritual company there. We will learn in this book with Emmanuel that sex, it's a connection between two or more people. So it's what we see in our society nowadays. Oh, go, enjoy, experiment, have one-night stands. But what we need to teach ourselves, our teens, our children, is that every time you encounter someone and you have that encounter, the intimate encounter, there is a connection there. So Emmanuel reminds us, let us educate and let us control it, because it's holy. It's a connection with God. He says sex is spirit and life at the service of the happiness and harmony of the universe. Consequently, it demands responsibility and discernment. So this is how holy it is. Sex is spirit and life combined, and at the service of the happiness and harmony on earth. So it changes the way we see sex, because we sometimes come from cultures and religious beliefs that sex is bad, that sex is something we cannot talk about. But Spiritism comes to show us that it is blessed, as long as we know to use it with responsibility and with discernment. So then he brings something that it is blows our mind, because it's so interesting. He says that sex is the flow of creative forces. We talk about being a creative force, but for what purpose? There's several that he tells us, that he lists. First is the Institute of Reincarnation. Okay, so if it wasn't for our parents and for sex, we wouldn't be here today. So that's why it's blessed. Through sex, we have the process of reincarnation. If we go through André Luiz books, this big series of André Luiz books that we recommend everyone to read, starting by Nosso Lar to The Messengers, we see he describes in several books that in the spiritual realm, there is a department in the spiritual colonies. Every spiritual colony has a department that is designated for reincarnation. There are specialized spirits who plan details, sometimes given the role or the mission that that spirit will have on earth, to the going to the gene and deciding exactly what will be the genetic expression of that person on earth. So that's why when we start the chapter talking about being in the body of men and women, we have to remember that there's no chance, quote unquote. Oh, I'm pregnant with a boy or girl. There is a design, there is a plan. Oh, way before the mother gets pregnant. That's why we will talk about abortion later, and how in Spiritism we know that there is a spiritual principle connected there. So yes, abortion is a crime because we're killing that soul who is about to reincarnate. So through sex, we have the Institute of Reincarnation. We built the temple of a home. We're gonna talk soon about chapter 2, which talks about the blessings of family. As we construct a family and we welcome the children, we are building a temple. And then he says, sex also generates the revitalizing joys of affection. So it's not only so that we can procreate and have children. No, through it, we revitalize the joys of affection. As long as we are doing it, as we said, not for my own satisfaction, my own pleasure, but I'm thinking about the person that I am connecting with, because it is holy. And he ends by saying, the priceless treasure of spiritual stimuli. What is this treasure of spiritual stimuli? Right? Emmanuel, tell us more. So we learn that Chico Xavier has the greatest example for us. He learned how to really sublimate it. Chico Xavier, for those who know, the greatest medium in Brazil who psychographed all these books that we study, more than 500 books. He had a missionary task on earth. He didn't marry, but he still had a physical body. He was a man. So Emmanuel, who was his spiritual mentor, taught him, talk to yourselves. Use that creative force. Ask the cells to go to your brain and use that creative force for other means. So we learn how to rechannel. The creative force is there, but we are rechanneling for this spiritual stimuli, for our spiritual purpose. That is the goal, friends. It's not easy, right? One step at a time, but that is the goal to get there. And then he says, okay, so that's the big question. What do we do with our sexual energies? That is the biggest question, right? What do we do with it? We learn we have to educate it. We know we have to take responsibility. But what do we do with it? He says, it's a long sentence. We'll read together and break it down together, okay? That is why our brothers and sisters need and should know that what they do with their genetic energies, observing the how, with whom, and for what they use those similar resources. So let's just keep those three parts of the sentence in mind. Understanding that all commitments in sexual life are equally subordinated to the law of cause and effect. And according to this very principle of everything we give to others in the affective world, someone will also give it to us. So let's go back. He's saying, what do we do with it? Remember, the first question that we started today, the quiz, was first, what is our role in this body that we were giving, of a man, of a woman? The second one is, what are we doing with it? How? How are we using these creative forces? He showed us the list in the previous slides. Are we checking any of this box, or are we using it for our own pleasure and satisfaction only? With whom? With whom we are making that connection? Not only physically, but mentally. Remember, we're co-creating, even in thought. And third, for what are we using it? What is the purpose that we are engaging in this? Those are the three questions that he says, let us reflect on this. Why? Why we need to know? Can we go out and do whatever we want? Have sex with whoever we want, not worry about anything? Yes, but there is a law cause and effect. Amália Domingo Soler, she was a medium, and there's a story in one of her books, 15 Cases of Past Lives. The book is already published in English, but there's one particular case. It's about this girl. She's dating this guy. She already knows that, it's not going anywhere, but, she continues leading him on. giving him, hopes that it will lead to something else in the future, up to the day that he was ready to propose. He was ready to go to the next step. And she said, no. Remember, she was giving him the hopes. So, heartbroken, he comes one day to her home, knocks at her door. Please open. Let us talk. I love you so much. Da-da-da. And she's like, no, go away. I don't want to do anything else with you. I don't need you in my life anymore. Then she hears a silence and then a loud noise. And she opens the door and finds out that he has actually killed himself because he was so heartbroken. How many cases like this we hear, right? Especially in our teens. They break up. Some, unfortunately, succeed in committing suicides. Others attempt to do suicide. But then the spirits ask. Well, Amalia Domingos Soler asked the spirits, is she co-responsible for his suicide? If we see with the eyes of society nowadays, with the dating apps, people are going out with one person, sleeping with another, seeing multiple people through multiple dating apps, and they might think that's, normal. But then the spirits say she was co-responsible for his suicide because she continued leading him on. So it's the law of cause and effect. There is, that's why Emmanuel used the words responsibility, because every action, there is a reaction. We will talk about in chapter 2 in a minute here about who are the people who we reincarnated with. And we will see that they were the ones that in the past, we might have a connection, we were probably friends. In this life, they might be in our families and we don't get along with that person. Why is that? Well, the law of cause and effect, right? God gives us the blessing sometimes of being the same family so that we can have an opportunity to readdress what we did in the past. So that's how Emmanuel ends chapter 1. A lot of food for thought, right? So let us breathe in and out because it's short, the chapters, but very deep. Then he goes to chapter 2, talking about family. Let us notice that from all the topics he could have talked about, he talks in the first chapter about the definition of sex. Why does he go to family next? Why is family chapter 2? With the higher spirits, we learn there's particular order for everything. So why families comes in chapter 2, where he would tell us in the very first sentence. But before we go there, the chapter starts by quoting the gospel according to Spiritism, saying that there are 2 types of families. There are those who are our blood ties, and then there's the spiritual ties. We were just talking about this case that Amalia Domingos Soler described it to us, right? And we're talking about reincarnation. There are those who we are born with. We are born in that family. We have those particular parents, those particular siblings. Those are blood ties, right? But in the gospel according to Spirit, we learn that that is true in this life, in the next life, it might not be true because I will probably not have the same parents, the same siblings. So the blood ties, they change, but the spiritual ties, it was stays. That's why we meet someone and they are not blood related, but we feel a connection so deep. And we say, wow, it feels like I know that person for such a long time. Well, that probably is true. But in this chapter, we're learning, why do we have this particular blood ties? Why I was born in this particular family? And that is the biggest question for us in this chapter. Let us go home and let us reflect why I was born in this particular family. So many people say, oh, I feel like how do we say in English, the ugly duck, or, the one that is cast out. I don't feel that I'm part of that family. How I was born in that family. Or why do I have such a hard time with this relationship with my mom, with my dad, with one of my siblings? Why, friends? Let us reflect on this because, again, nothing is by chance. Everything is planned in the spiritual realm in very detail. There's no, this was a mistake. It was a one-night stand and I got pregnant. No, there's no mistakes by God. So let us reflect on this. But then he says, the first sentence, which is why family comes as chapter 2. He says, of all the associations which exist on earth, with the exception, of course, of humanity, because humanity is the most important one, perhaps none more important is the educational and the regenerative function, the constitution of a family. So, building a family is the most important association that we can have. That is not what we see nowadays, right? And that's why this book is so important in our lives. Because we were born and our parents says, you have to study, you have to go to school, you need to get a degree. Okay. But when we get to the spiritual realm and we are asked, are we gonna be asked if we have this particular job, if we were CEO in this particular company? That will not matter. But family, building a family, raising children, it is in the gospel according to Spiritism. Motherhood, parenthood, we say too, right? Because fathers have equally, right, have also a very important role. But that is the greatest mission of all, motherhood on earth. But then society says, you should have a child and you get 3 months, 2 months, and you should go back to work. How are you gonna really take care of this new family member if you have quickly to put that child in daycare to go to work? Society nowadays doesn't help mothers and fathers transition to that such a crucial role. But it will come a time, and the mentors have shared with us that would be acknowledged. But Emmanuel says, family first is education. So education doesn't start at school, it starts within the home. What do I have to learn within this family? Do I need to be more understanding? Do I need to be more forgiving towards the member of my family? Do I need to learn how to see them? They might be completely different than I, but respect their decisions, their needs. So first is education. And that's the second is regenerative. To regenerate is to generate anew. So what is not there yet that we need to regenerate and generate anew? Is it that bond that we talked about that we need to work on? That person that we need to reconcile that is within our families? And we might think, oh, but maybe they are not here anymore. But that's okay. We can still reconcile with those, even though they might not be physically here with us anymore, but working within ourselves. So family is educational and regenerative. Emmanuel says that of a similar association in which two beings are conjugated, attending to the bonds of affection, the home appears guaranteeing the foundations of civilization. Emmanuel is so great. In this book and in other books, he talks about that enchantment that happened, in the first years or the first, moments of dating, the attraction. So that bonds of affection that brings two people together to form a home, as he says, is the foundation of civilization. But what is a home? Is it only two couples? And we talked a lot about this when we studied this chapter last week. That a family is complete if we fulfill the roles of parents, if we have children. That is the true family. In Spiritism, we learned that those couples who decided not to have children, it's truly because it needs to be for really a missionary purpose. Really helping others and the children on earth. Because it is the foundation of civilization. Maybe we cannot have our own children, but the couple can take care through foster care, through adoption, through so many other sources of the children of others. But through this will be the foundations of civilization. Through the couple establish their functions, the principle of reincarnation, as we talk about, according to the divine laws, enabling the executive work of the highest programs of action in the spirit world. So reincarnation is the highest programs of action in our world. Bringing a child or a baby, that's how we are truly helping our society and continue on and helping ourselves, because the children come to teach us. So it is divine. And through the paternity and maternity, men and women acquire more extensive credits of the higher life. If there is nothing that acquires more credits in the higher realm than educating a child. And, in a study group that we are some of us are part of in a group in Brazil, we're studying a chapter, very interesting chapter, that we'll recommend everyone to read in the book, The Messengers. Talks about Otávio. And when we talk about parenthood, Otávio is such a great example because he planned, remember when we talk about how reincarnations are planned in the spiritual realm? Well, he had the role of coming and reincarnating and not having children of his own. But because his dad remarried and died quite young, he would have the task of taking care of 6 children, 6 siblings that will come to him, and he will be responsible for. And you can read in the book the story and how he ended up, because of his misuse, his creative forces, misuse sex, he failed in that reincarnation. But we see that as an example for us of how we have to rethink those who are with, not only the parenthood that we know through having our own children, but he had the tasks of take care of those 6 children that were in his home. So that will lead us to this most extensive credits of higher life. And then he ends with the most important question for us, as we talked about who is in our family. He says, rooted in past lives of all those who compose it, the terrestrial families thus form of different members, in as much as in the commonly affections and disaffections, friends and enemies meet again. Friends, there is no chance. It's not, we didn't come with a parachute and fell on this family because God didn't have anywhere else to place us. No. Think of it as a chess game, a very complex chess game. And as we move one piece of the game, everything else moves. So God is so great that in the biggest chess games of all, which is not a game, right? Because it's our lives, it's so important, but we're just giving it as a reference. He plans every single detail. So when we come, reincarnate in a certain family, we meet someone, we form a family ourselves. Who are those who will be connected with us? Yes, there will be those affections, those friends from the past that we come to help us. In our families, there is always that, at least that one person, parents, siblings, maybe an uncle, an aunt. There is at least that one person who comes to guide us, to really help us, if not more. But there are also those who come who were our disaffections in the past, who were our enemies in the past. Remember, we said, who are our enemies in this life? And we use the word enemies, but we may say, oh, I don't have any enemies in my life. But we have that person, that relative that we really dislike, or that one person that in family reunions we're like, oh, please God, that person should not be there, please. Or I don't want to sit next to that person in the family dinner. So that disaffection are those who in the past we were connected, we were friends. But there might have been a betrayal. We might have killed each other. We don't need to go far. Just look at our history and we'll see, right? So many different things. But now we are reborn in the same family to reconcile. And how can we do it? We might be asking. How can we reconcile? How can we make peace with ourselves, with that person? In this study that I was sharing with you about this week, we learned a great technique by Corina Novellino in Brazil. She was in the city of Sacramento, and she was responsible for continue much of the work of Professor Euripides Barçanufo. And in a really a moving story that someone shared, there was a recommendation that they said that Corina Novellino said, if you have someone that you need to reconcile, you don't get along, 5 minutes of your day, every day, separate 5 minutes and pray for that person. But a heartfelt prayer, not a prayer like, oh God, please take this person away from my eye. No, a heart. Imagine that person enveloped in light, visualizing you guys reconnecting. 5 minutes every day. That will for sure switch the relationship. So an exercise for all of us that we can put in practice. 5 minutes a day. Let us pray for that person that we don't get along. Because Jesus said, don't wait for later. Reconcile with your enemies now, today, in this reincarnation. Why are we gonna wait, friends? If God placed those people in our lives, in our families, in this life, is because we can do it. If not, he would said, no, maybe down the road. But in this life, if they are in our families, because there is a purpose, and because he says, you have the tools to do it. So we will end by recapping, knowing that family is an organization of divine origin. It's divine. Remember, the first school starts in the family. In the home is our first school. The most important school of all, the school of the soul. If we master this curriculum, we're good. Very hard curriculum, right? Very hard. But it's the first school, the school of the soul. In the family, we find the necessary instruments for our own improvement, for building a better world. Friends, we reincarnate not to fulfill that job in that company, not to buy that house or that car, but we reincarnate to truly have an opportunity to improve ourselves and to help others. So how are we going to improve ourselves if we make this most sacred place sometimes that is our home a nightmare? If we dread going home because we don't feel comfortable, if there is that one person that we don't talk in our family. So what people do, they will have to account on it. But what are we doing ourselves? Are we doing our share? And that's what this book comes to invite us, to truly shed a light. And we cannot end without Jesus, right? Our guiding model. Let us look at him, because when it's hard and we don't know, he's there, he's guiding. He told us, you can do what I'm doing and much more. But he came to truly exemplify to us. First and foremost, he showed to us that our true family is our eternal family, right? All of us. He taught us that There's no distinction. We're brothers and sisters. We're not different than anyone else. He taught us that truly he didn't have a quote unquote home of himself. We don't read about in the gospel like, oh, they gathered in the house of Jesus. It was always in the house of, Paul, or in the house of one of the disciples, or in someone else's home. But not saying that he is here for our eternal family. That is all of us. So with that, and we know it's a lot, so we let us digest, but we're gonna open up for questions before we finalize with Jesus, and that encounter with Jesus. If there's anything else,
Comments, questions? So what happens next? Next week when we come, just a preview, huh? The book here. Preview. It's about dating. Nobody teaches us that, right? Where do we learn about dating? I will be here near the camera. Thank you, Daisy. So, where do we learn about dating? Nowhere. Basically. And that's where the problems begin. But dating, chapter 3. He's going to just pinpoint some of the things we will go deeper next week. He says, there are reasons why two people feel this attraction. It's not by chance. There is a sweet mystery, he says, quote unquote, sweet mystery, that only reincarnation and affinity can explain. So you're not crazy. We're not crazy. Like, what have I done? Why? There are reasons. It would be very silly on us to think that we got attracted by someone by chance. No, there's no chance. And he explains also, which is quite interesting, that there are previous lives experiences that can lead us to that. Sometimes even passionate experiences in the past, like sometimes even crimes. Have you ever watched on Netflix the Cook of Customary? Yes, yeah, the cook.
Cook.
Yeah, she's the chef. Watch it. Yes. Because it's going to show to us a bit of what we're talking about and where we were in previous lives. Often. That we were, having these encounters with people for several reasons. And having, sexual relationships with people for several reasons. Then we re-encounter them here for a reason. And then he's going to tell us that also in this dating scenario, there will be spiritual influences. Sometimes by the people who will be our children later. They are the ones on the behind the scenes bringing us closer. So when we look at our children like, oh, you made me do this. Thank God. Thank you, because we needed this. And then Emmanuel, besides many other interesting things in this chapter we're going to see, he's going to talk about the use of reasoning when we date, which is very unusual, because we usually don't reason anything when we date. Right? When we reason, it's too late. It's already past dating, engagement, marriage, and children, and we reason too late. He says we need to reason when we're dating. So this is the preview for next week.
Makes me think of, we allowed to talk about ourselves,
Mm-hmm. Can you say out loud so people can also?
so we can talk about something. My first marriage. And it was just what you talked about. I always remember seeing my first wife in college. Never forget it. Still indelibly etched in my mind. This was the woman I was going to marry. But obviously, there was a lot of past life issues because we never really, after we came together, never really grew. It's like stagnant. Fortunately, she was very wise and said, "Get the hell out of here. We're splitting up." Now, we still have an affection and love for each other, but we're so much better off carrying on our lives later on. And I've always maintained that we came together for reasons that for various children. Practically, there were a number of miscarriages. So obviously, there was a lot of stuff in past life, which I didn't understand until, of course, I was introduced to Spirit. Finally, we had one child, and we went to heaven too. It's really this whole scenario of life and sex, what it leads to, and see the influences that happen. Now, my former wife does not, she's very devout Catholic, but she doesn't hold to this reason past life. But something has to explain why you go through these things. So,
Yeah, interesting. There will be a chapter in this book very soon. Like in a few chapters, we'll talk about marriage and then divorce, a specific chapter about divorce. And then we'll go deeper into that. Thank God we don't go to hell. Or, you know. Yeah.
To soften the process.
Yeah. Thank God there is no prohibition. And it's good, as you said, to know of this, to understand, and to pacify within.
especially not to have these disastrous divorces where you
become
people split.
enemies. You become enemies,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Exactly.
And you came together for a particular reason, but you don't know that unless you studied something.
Exactly.
So it is a real blessing to be able to hear motivation.
And we'll be talking about spiritual influences in our families to understand why sometimes divorces are brutal and become brutal, because we're not alone. We're not blaming on the discarnate spirits, but that's a reality. Sometimes divorces are, as you said, disastrous because there are influences there trying to make our lives living hell. But why does this happen, right? So watching the Cook of Castamari will be very therapeutic. Go to Netflix if it's still there, I hope.
What's it called?
This is an original.
Yeah, it's an original.
Yeah, because it's Netflix.
Ah, okay. Thank God.
What's the type?
Cook
Cook of
Castamari.
Castamari.
Yeah, Castamari, because it's like in Spain. But it's fully dubbed in English.
Yeah, it's a Spanish production.
It's very well done. And it's so good for us to watch it It's very therapeutic. It's almost like a novel. It is a novel, but it shows to us where we were in previous lives. Because there, all the roles are there. From the people who are the servants to those who are the boss, and then how it changes, and everything we've done in previous lives, and now we're here. So then we were there, and now we are here, and it's good to identify ourselves there because we were switching for lives, the roles, and yet making mistakes because people think only the people who have power make mistakes. We have power no matter where we are. Even in a kitchen, the people who work in the kitchen, they have different levels of power, and they can do good or not. And in those decisions, consequences for everybody. And especially when we talk about family, marriage, because it's still a new thing, the marriage that we portray in our Western society. They say, oh, I choose who I get married. Majority of marriages on earth are arranged. Majority of marriages. There is no right or wrong. Maybe it's a good way to go. I don't know. But this was our reality in previous lives. And this is quite new for us. Oh, now I can choose. And how am I choosing the people whom I date? Especially nowadays in the US, in Western societies, now we are in pure liberation. Like, you can date as many as you want, you can have sex as many times as you want. And there are people who they're quite young, they come to the therapeutic offices like psychologists, psychiatrists, or doctors in general, and they come and say, I've had like 45. I've already had sex with 45 people. And they are still in their mid-20s or 30s. And this has become the reality nowadays. It's like a race, a competition,
No opportunity for.
but there are consequences.
They're not developing true love.
Yes. And one technique that I was listening to this morning, some spiritist educators in Brazil were mentioning, it's good to teach to children starting 3-year-olds and up. Take a ball, throw the ball on a wall, and see that they come back. Action, reaction. Teach them from the get-go that there, for every action, there's a reaction. Yes, you can date, but there's a reaction. Yes, you can flirt, but there is a reaction. Yes, you can think, but there is a reaction. And then, what happens next? So what we're teaching here is Daisy recapitulated for us. Emmanuel said at the beginning, responsibility. Who are we to say? That's why we are all seated here, because none of us are masters of this. That's why Mr. Joseph said, nobody can stand up and speak out loud about this, because none of us are masters. Right? That's why we're all seated, because we're all learning. All learning. Mm-hmm. Even if in this life we have behaved well. Sometimes the most well-behaved person in this life is the one that messed up the most in the previous life. They messed up so badly that when, before they reincarnated, they said, this one, I'm going to behave because there are many lives for me to help. So now they are amazing. You never know. Read the book, Sex and Destiny. The one that was most well behaved is the one that pushed everybody to the abyss. So when we look at ourselves in the mirror, we can't say, oh, I'm free. That's why Jesus said, do not cast a stone at anybody. Because who are we? Right? Jennifer Lopez just got married again for the 7th time, I don't know. When I look at it and I say, good girl, because she believes in love better than people who don't believe in love and are just going crazy. Oh, at least she believes in that, and she's trying again, we think, right? And we're saying this because sometimes we're so prejudiced. We look at people. It's beautiful that people are trying again instead of giving up and isolating themselves, because that's not human. We're not made for isolation. We're not made to be alone. We're not made to be out there by ourselves in a mountain without anybody. No, we're made to be connected. But how to connect? So next week, as we recap dating, even if we are married, remarried, dating, engaged, it's an experience that we'll have some other time again. If not in this life, in the next life. So it's good to know what it is and how to go by. So it's interesting. It's the first time in my life that I see somebody talking about dating and reasoning. And it's quite interesting to see the combination, dating and reasoning. Let's see what it is. Anybody else like to add anything before we finalize? We're not going to play the encounter with Jesus because it's a little past our time, but we will do a visualization with Jesus, okay? Anybody has any major question or comment you want to ask? Sure. We can do it afterwards too, okay? It's okay. After we finish, if there's any question or comment, we're still here. We're never in a rush to leave the center. We're always in a rush to get here. But to leave, there's no time. There's no time, okay? Good, right? Prepared? Let's take a look at this beautiful painting by Akiane when she was only 8. Now she's a beautiful young woman who continues mesmerizing us with her paintings. And though not Christian, she had this inner encounter with the Christ. And this is the closest. Even before science realized that Jesus was not what we portrayed, she already got a sense of it. This Christ is somebody who brings us together, never separates us from anybody. Let us feel at this moment this beautiful presence of the Christ in our lives. He knows us. He understands us. He cares for us. Let us visualize His illuminated presence in front of us. From His heart, rays of healing light envelop us in kindness, in compassion, true love. His illuminated hands touch our heads and deliver the healing molecules that our minds and body needs. We breathe in and out. Feeling His love and His kindness. His loving and kind hands touch our hearts, our heart chakra, balancing our emotions. And a shower of healing molecules permeate our hearts, de-obstructing our arteries, veins in our whole bodies. Opening pathways for love, balanced love, detached love, liberating love. He kindly holds our hands and looks at us in the eyes and asks each one of us, what do you want from me? Let us breathe in and out. And in the count of 3, let us answer to this wonderful question. 1, 2, 3. Answer to his question. Breathe. As the Christ, Jesus in front of us, tells us, I will take care of your request. Trust me. Trust in God. Be with me every day. And everything will be all right. Let us visualize the Christ in our homes. Visualize that He's placing a bouquet of healing flowers on our dining table. Flowers that will emanate healing molecules every day. Protection to our homes. He embraces each one of us, assuring us of His constant presence in our lives. And we raise our thoughts in gratitude. Thank you, God, for sending your divine representative, our humble Master Jesus, who is still awaiting our participation in life. Thank you for this encounter amongst ourselves. For the loving spirit doctors, nurses, and therapists here, were always giving off of themselves to us and embracing us with so much kindness. We visualize healing rays of light permeating the water bottles that we are going to distribute, so we can take the remedies that we need to continue balancing ourselves. Feeling joy and hope. We hope truly, dear Jesus, to stay with you every day, to listen to your wonderful teachings and love unconditionally. With your permission, we close this meeting with our deepest gratitude. And so be it. Let us take the water bottle. It's unopened. Thank you. You can take home. For those who are with us over the internet, thank you. We'll answer to your question as we wrap it up. We will answer to it in a written comment. Thank you, friends.